Hey guys, how's it going? We are on my Havoc Demon Hunter, and I'm going to be doing a PvP crash course for just Havoc Demon Hunter. I've done this before. I think I've done it 2 times before, because I've kind of mained Havoc Demon Hunter since Legion came out. And I made one for 7.2 and 7.2.5, and everyone's asking me for 7.3 updated one, even though it's basically the same. So if you want a more in-depth one, feel free to go over to my previous ones, because it's basically the same thing. Basically running the same build I've always run, but basically I'm going to be talking about talents, abilities, rotation, and artifact traits that would be noteworthy in PvP, and usually kind of situations where you'd want to take certain talents over others. So, starting out with abilities. We don't have a lot of abilities. We have defensives. We have really good defensives when they're up, and just a lot of mobility and a lot of gap closers. So, starting out with Blade Dance. Strikes all nearby enemies for 277,000 physical damage and increases your chance to dodge by 100% for 1 second. I do believe, it doesn't say this, but any like ability that's kind of cast while you're in, what's it called? Blade Dance. Like while it's being used, it won't hit you from what I've noticed. Or maybe that's Metamorphosis. It's probably Metamorphosis, so take that back. Basically just use this if you have a lot of melee on you. It's my suggestion. Blur, increase your chance to dodge by 50%, reduces all damage taken by 35%. Again, this is one of our main defensives. It's just a really good defensive. Increases your dodge chance and reduces all the damage you take. Chaos Nova, unleash an eruption of foul energy, stunning all nearby enemies for 5 seconds and dealing 81,000 chaos damage. I count this as a defensive because if you stun people, it has a chance to spawn a lesser soul fragment. And if you use this in a big group, you tend to get a lot of shattered souls, which do heal you. Chaos Strike, slice your target for 409,000 chaos damage. Critical strikes for 20 fury. This is one of our main abilities. I'll show you guys right here. Gonna generate some fury, and this is what Chaos Strike looks like. It's that little kind of you jump up in the air and hit people twice thing. Consume magic, interrupts the enemy spellcasting and locks them from that school of magic for 3 seconds. Generates 50 fury on a successful interrupt. Again, this is our one interrupt. If you find yourself kind of below 90 fury, you use this. You'll get a lot of fury. You'll be able. It's a pretty big payoff for interrupting someone, because not only do you interrupt them, but you also get a lot of fury, which you can then dump into a lot of chaos strikes or annihilations. Next is Darkness. Summons a darkness around you in an 8-yard radius, granting friendly targets a 20% chance to avoid all damage. Lasts 8 seconds. This is just... it gives you a chance to not take damage, really. Demon's Bite is our fury generator. Quickly attack for 226,000 physical damage. Pretty self-explanatory. I-Beam, blasts all enemies directly in front of you for 447,000 chaos damage. I-Beam always critical strikes, and this synergizes with this, which does extra chaos damage, basically, after your I-Beam finishes. Next is Fell Rush. Everyone knows what this is, or should. It's just this little dash thing. It's like you see every Demon Hunter ever using it. Yeah, it does that, and it does chaos damage to people in a line. Next is Fury the Illidari. Throws Twin Blades of the Deceiver down in a whirlwind of energy, causing 765,000 chaos damage. I'll use it here. That's what it does. It's those swirling things on the grounds, and then it synergizes with your artifact ability by giving you this. When your artifact ability ends, 60% of the damage it dealt erupts in an explosion of fell energy, dividing that damage among all nearby enemies in chaos. It's chaos damage, so it goes through all the absorbs and stuff. In Prison's a demon, beast, or humanoid, incapacitating them for 1 minute. Damage will cancel the effects. This is our 1 CC as a demon hunter. It's our CC, really. Metamorphosis. This is the ability that I like to kind of build my builds around, or at least my own builds. I've talked about this before. It basically buffs all of your abilities, gives you 25% haste, and gives you leech. It does stun people for 3 seconds. Oh wait, no, it doesn't stun people anymore, it just stasis them. Okay, didn't really know that. They must have changed that. Okay, basically it's our offensive cooldown. You go into demon form, I'll explain that later. I'll explain how to burst. Upon landing, you're transformed to Hellish Demon for 30 seconds, greatly empowering your Chaos Strike and Blade Dance abilities, getting 100% leech and 25% haste. It's our It's our offensive. The Spectral Sight does this. It shows your enemies, and it shows stealth to people. So if you're going against a rogues or feral druids or anyone that can really stealth, arcane mage, it's really useful. And it has a low cooldown, surprisingly. I don't really use it that much because I always just kind of forget to press it, but if you do know and remember to press it, then I'd say it's a very useful tool. Throw glaive. Throw a demonic glaive at the target, dealing 368,000 physical damage. The glaive can ricochet up to 2 additional enemies within 10 yards. Max 2 charges. Basically, it's a range that slows people with our talents. Vengeful Retreat. Removes all snares and vault away. Nearby enemies take 48,000 physical damage and have their movement speed reduced by 70%. It's technically a getaway. You can basically just do this, use your wings, and then Fell Rush, and you can cover a pretty far distance. If you get really good at it, like, I'd say I'm kind of good at using it. You can usually use it backwards, flip your character the way you're wanting to go, and then use your Fell Wings, and then Fell Rush, use your wings again, and then Fell Rush. And I can guarantee you I could get at least over to that side whenever it comes up. So I'll show you guys here what like you'd want to do if you're trying to just get away from someone. At least you preferably want to be elevated or like on a higher level than someone. I'm gonna close that TSM because I always forget to, but I love it so much because it tells me how much auctions are worth. So I'm gonna show you guys kind of what you'd want to do technically. Like say you're at Lumbermill, you can do this: wings, Fell Rush, wings, and then Fell Rush again. Unfortunately I didn't make, but even then that's pretty fucking far just for pressing 2 abilities. And then you can do the same thing really, but I think Vengeful Retreat does give you more momentum technically, like more move speed. But anyway, stayed on that longer than I wanted to. Double jump, it's that thing. Your mastery doesn't really matter, just gives you movement speed. And then Shattered Souls, I'd say, is the other kind of main thing that my build is centered around. Kill an enemy sometimes creates a soul fragment that is consumed when you approach it, healing you for 25% of your max health and generates 35 fury. The soul fragment came from a demon, gives you 20% increased damage. So, going on to, I guess, your artifact. I'm gonna look for anything that's like huge. I don't think there's anything that's very monumental in this except for this, which, so if you're going against like a demonology warlock or someone that, if there's a lot of people around you or a lot of mobs around you, use this because your damage is increased by 3% for each target around you. So if there's 10 people around you, you're using First Blood possibly, use this. There's 10 people around you, or 5, even then 5 is still a decent amount of damage increase. You're going to hit them for 15% increased damage, for 5, 30% increased for 10. That does increase the main damage, I believe. So if you use First Blood, it's going to increase the damage that it does to the primary target by a decent amount. The next thing you want to know is Deceiver's Fury. You generate 20 Fury whenever you dodge an attack or spell, so you're just going to generate Fury passively. And then Feast on the Souls. This is one of the most OP artifact traits, I'd say. When you consume a soul fragment, the remaining cooldown on I-Beam and Chaos Nova is reduced by 5 seconds. And I'll talk about this more, but it does synergize very, very well with Demonic. And going into talents now, what a transition. Foulblade, it's just your go-to, really. It's a gap closer. It has a 15-yard range, I think, or yeah, 15. You can do that. It's literally a gap closer that does fire damage, so it ignores armor, and it has a chance to reset, and it generates Fury. Next, I'd suggest using Demon Blades or Demonic Appetite. Personally, I prefer Demonic Appetite because I know it synergizes very well with Feast on the Souls, and with the build that I run, I try to I-Beam as much as possible, and whenever I do I-Beam, this reduces the Fury cost of I-Beam, this reduces the cooldown on I-Beam, and then whenever you Chaos Strike, you have a chance to spawn a Lesser Soul Fragment, and then those Lesser Soul Fragments do spawn or reduce the cooldown of your I-Beam, which means you get Metamorphosis off more, which means you do more damage. Other than that, if you don't use Demonic Appetite, I suggest Demon Blades. Your auto attacks have a 60% chance to deal additional shadow damage and generate Fury. Obviously, if the RNG gods are on your side, you can just spam Chaos Strike as much as possible, and then using that in a Foulblade is just like, it's a lot of Fury. I haven't used that build in a while because I do like the heals that you do get from this too, but haven't used Prepared. Wouldn't suggest it over the other two. Next row, don't use Chaos Cleave in PvP. Don't really use it. Haven't used it ever. It's between First Blood and Bloodlet for me. I like Bloodlet just because it does a lot of damage. I usually find that it's in my top 3 damage in Battlegrounds. First Blood, I'd suggest it in possibly arenas. Reduces the fury cost of blade dance by 20, so you're going to be able to use this way more. It's going to cost way less fury, and it's going to actually do damage, and does 831 damage to the first target struck. So this, you'll dodge people, you'll do extra damage, and its fury is reduced. It's pretty win-win. That's why I suggest it for arenas, but for battlegrounds, I just like taking this just for the damage it does. Next, you can take any of these really. It's up to your personal preference. I like soul rending just because I do like being in metamorphosis as much as possible, or demon form. It gives you 70% leech. I've made a video on this. It's literally titled 70% leech. It's very nice. You don't really take a lot of damage. If you do take damage, you can pop blur in your darkness and to get most of that health back with the leech you do get. Outside of that, Nether Walk, slip into the Nether, increasing movement speed by 100%, becoming immune to damage but unable to attack. This is good if you're probably going to get focused really hard, say in a 2v2 or 3v3 you're going against. Let's say you have an arms warrior, someone who's just tankier than you, and they decide to go on you. They pop all their cooldowns, you use this while their cooldowns are up, all their cooldowns are gone, you don't take damage. Other than that, there's Desperate Instincts, which reduces the damage that Blur does. It increases the damage reduction that Blur gives by 15%, so that makes it a 65% increase. Additionally, you automatically trigger Blur when you fall below 35% health. This effect can only occur when Blur is not on cooldown. So, honestly, if you know how to use Blur and know when to use it, I wouldn't suggest using this. I'd suggest using the other two. But if you don't really know how to use Blur and just don't know when to use it, I'd suggest using this. Next, 106 row. This is probably the most versatile row out of all of them. It's really up to your preference. It's really up to your playstyle, which is what I like about Demon Hunters, because a lot of their talents, it's up to your decision and how you want to play. If you want to run momentum and run that kind of dash around and the gap close and have increased damage with that, then go for it. It gives you 20% increased damage whenever you use your Fell Rush or Vengeful Retreat. If you want to run a kind of stunny build, which is what I like, because it stuns, it does a lot of damage, and it's a 30-second cooldown. And then if they're immune to stuns, it does a lot more damage. That's what Fell Eruption is. 20-yard range. I just like it because it's a high damage hit, and it's just one button. It's like a button that just does a million damage, how I look at it, and it stuns someone for 2 seconds. Outside of that, a lot of people run Nemesis. It does 15% increased damage in PvP, I believe. Basically makes it so that your target takes 15% increased damage from you, and then if you kill them, you gain a buff that increases your damage for a certain amount of time. I don't know what it is in PvP because I don't really use Nemesis. Most of the time, I use Fell Eruption or Momentum. 108 row. Master of the Glaive gives you slow. It's required, I'd say. It's your only slow, really. But you're with enough mastery, or like if the person just doesn't really know what they're doing, the movement speed that you get from your mastery kind of does make up for it. But I just prefer the slow the Master of Glaive gives. So getting on to the bottom row talent. Again, this is one of the more flexible row talents that there is. Demonic. I-Beam causes you to enter demon form for 8 seconds after it finishes dealing damage. Again, this is what I always run, really. With the build I run, I like getting as much I-Beams as possible, staying in demon form as much as possible, mainly because it really feels like the class fantasy where you transform into a demon a lot, other than just having it on like a 3-minute cooldown. That gives you leech and buffs your abilities. Outside of that, there's Spell Barrage. Gives you a ability that has a 30-yard range, 1-minute cooldown. However, it does get reduced from your abilities, and unleashes fell damage, causing a decent amount of chaos damage to your target and nearby enemies for 2 seconds. If you're going against someone you don't think you'll be in melee range a lot, I would suggest using this. However, Demon Hunters are so mobile that if you do play most situations correctly, you won't really... I feel like the only person that can really out-mobile a Demon Hunter would be a Mistweaver Monk, Resto Druid, and that's about it. Maybe Rogue. Maybe, if they're really good. Other than that, there's really not much to worry about. So if you want to run Fell Barrage just for the damage and the ranged, then go for it. The next choice is Chaos Blades. Increases all damage done by 30%. While active, your auto attacks deal 150% increased damage and causes chaos damage. This is good if you're going against someone like a Death Knight who has anti-magic shell. And if you really just want the damage increase and want the chaos damage, that's the situation you're going to want to take it. Because chaos damage ignores anti-magic shell and all those absorbs and stuff, you'd probably take this. Going on to honor talents, Gladiator's Medallion, Reinforced Armor, Cover of Darkness, usually what I just go for all the time. The reason I like Cover of Darkness so much is because it basically gives you a bubble for 8 seconds, because it gives you a 70% increased. It gives you a 70% chance to basically avoid all damage done to you, which I think is very valuable. I think it's a lot better than the other two. I know Solitude's good if you're alone a lot, but I don't. Most of the time I find that people are usually within melee range of me, or 15 yards of me. I don't like Glimpse that much just because I feel like Blur for 3 seconds isn't really that valuable. Other than that, anytime you're victim to magical effect, you gain 10 Fury. Unending Hatred, I just like having Fury, so that's why I use this. If you go against an Affliction Warlock or anyone who has a lot of damage over time effects, I would suggest Reverse Magic. If you do Reverse Magic with a lot of unstable Afflictions on you, I can almost guarantee that you'll almost one-shot the Affliction Warlock. And then there's also Eye of Leothris. You keep a watchful eye over the enemy. Whenever they cast a harmful spell, they suffer 7% of their total health, 7% of their health and shadow damage, and Restoration of Eye. Basically, if you use this on a caster, let's see, who's a person who spams a lot of spells? Lava Burst, Elemental Shaman, I'd say. Arcane Mage, Fire Mage, Frost Mage, any caster really that casts a lot of spells, use this on them, they're going to take a lot of damage. Other than that, next row, I don't really like Mana Rift all that much. It has a lot of potential, but usually people don't stand in it enough. You can use Demonic Origins, which reduces the cooldown of your Metamorphosis by 2 minutes and now lasts 15 seconds. While not in Metamorphosis, your damage is increased by 10%. It's between this and Awaken the Demon. I like Awaken the Demon just because it gives me a kind of... It's almost like it gives you 70% leech with the build I run, whenever you get below 50% health. If you do go below 50% health and drop to 20, it gets increased by another 6 seconds. That mixed with your I-Beam, you can basically, if you go below 50% health, use I-Beam, and then go below 20% health, that's like another Metamorphosis, so that's why I use it. Other than that, the bottom row talent, Detainment, if you really need like the CC. With Detainment, you make it so your Imprison isn't broken by damage. So if you need that, then go for it. Mana Break, this is good against healers or anyone that goes a lot. Deals 5% of target's maximum health and chaos damage. Damage increased to lower the target's current mana, up to 25% of the target's health and damage. Pretty self-explanatory. If someone's low on mana, you find maybe you're going against a team that just tries to outlast you. The healer, you assume the healer is going to be low on mana towards the end of the fight. You want to switch to them hard. I'd suggest taking Mana Break. Rain from Above, I just like this because it flies you in the air and you shoot fireballs at people. It does, I think, 5% of their total health now, down from 10, but it's still a decent amount. Okay, now that we're just finally done covering everything, let's talk about the kind of rotation that you're going to want to go. Ideally, since I'm using Bloodlit, you're going to want to keep Bloodlit. You're going to want to keep Throglaive on a cooldown. So you're going to at least want 1 charge of it, which is usually what I aim for. You're going to keep 1 charge of it down. You're going to want to generate Fury. You're going to want to use Fellblade whenever you can. However, if you're going against someone that's very mobile and that has a lot of gap closers, say you're not going to be around them that much, you're going to want to try to conserve Fellblade a little bit so you can get that gap closer on them. Other than that, with the build I run with Demonic, you're going to want to I-Beam a lot. Try to get your maximum amount of Annihilations and Metamorphosis as possible. And then with the Demonic Appetite talent that I'm running, you're going to want to get all the Fell Souls, or Soul Fragments that spawn whenever they break off of someone, whenever you Chaos Strike them. Other than that, basically just make sure you keep your Bloodlet on people. Make sure you get Soul Fragments whenever they go off, like that, because it reduces the cooldown of your I-Beam. Use your Fell Eruption whenever you can, or whenever you need the CC, and then use I-Beam on cooldown. Outside of that, that's about just how you play Demon Hunter. And it's not that challenging. Burst is basically the same. You don't really have a lot of burst with this build, with the build I run. But if you're running Chaos Blades and Nemesis or whatever kind of bursty build you want, basically whenever you pop your burst, you're going to want a Chaos Nova. And I'll show you guys kind of how to burst. You're basically going to want to go in with Metamorphosis, pop your Chaos Nova, pop your Fury of the Eldari, and then just spam as many annihilations as possible. And then try to get your I-beams off. Usually I like using I-beam. With this build, I like using I-beam as much as possible, mainly because the earlier you use I-beam, the more of a window you have to, I guess, have the cooldown of it reduced. So I might even get another I-beam off here soon if I get lucky with the Soul Shard procs. Doesn't look like I will, but I almost got an increased duration on Metamorphosis. I actually might here. Yeah, so you'll see here. And it's interesting, it didn't actually refresh it. I'm not sure if that's a bug, because it does it in PvP, but... Anywho, that is Havoc Demon Hunter. It's not that hard. I'm trying to think of scenarios. If you do get low on health, and there's a lot of people around you, use Chaos Nova. It generates a bunch of soul shards, and I'm pretty sure, yeah. If you're running this, it gives you Fury, and whenever a soul shard does break off of someone, if you grab it, it heals you. So, and Chaos Nova does have a chance to spawn lesser soul shards from people. So if you use this when there's a lot of people or pets around you, there's a high percentage that you're going to be able to, I guess, just look for the soul shards, grab the soul shards, get a lot of health from it. Outside of that, if there's a lot of people around you, use Blade Dance. Basically gives you dodge chance. Use Blur whenever you think someone's going to burst you. I like using Blur and Darkness as separate cooldowns, because with the leech that I do have from my demonic kind of talented Metamorphosis, I find that the damage reduction that you do get from Blur and the dodge chance you get with the leech that you do get from demon form, it's usually more than enough defensives to kind of negate the damage that you're taking and then some. So if anything, when someone pops cooldowns and you're in demon form and you pop Blur, you'll be able to at least heal the same amount of damage that they're doing to you. And then if you really can't do that and you find that you're still dropping kind of in health, I'd suggest using Darkness then. If you use Darkness while in demon form, you will literally heal while you're in it and you're hitting someone, which I think is the funniest thing. But that's it. That's about it. Try using Fury of the Eldari while in demon form because it heals you just a shit ton. Outside of that, there is not much to this class, really. You kind of just, I guess, just ending tips. Manage your defensives very effectively. If you use I-beam, the build I run, try to use I-beam as much as possible. Try to get as many annihilations as possible. Try to get soul shards. Try to Chaos Nova as much as you can. Outside of that, if someone is a ranged class or someone who's just mobile and you're spamming Fellblade, I'd suggest you try to stop doing that. Try to stop doing that, and then try to conserve your Fellblade for whenever you need that gap closer. Because if people really, really know how to kind of counter Demon Hunter, they're going to be able to bait out your Fell Rushes and Vend for retreats and make it so you don't have a gap closer. So that's why I'd suggest conserving Fellblade. That's about it, guys. Thank you for watching. If you guys liked the video, give it a thumbs up. It helps me out a lot. If you guys have any questions, comments, tips, concerns, anything like that, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. Let me know what videos you guys want to see. All of that jazz. As always, thank you guys for watching. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.